Good to have you with us. This is ARIRANG News. It's 4 p.m. here in Seoul, and I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. We begin with the central bank's unexpected rate cut. The key rate is at an all-time low now at 1.75%. The cut is aimed at reviving the sluggish economy, but there are also concerns that it will raise the already snowballing household debt. Here's our economics correspondent, Hwang Ji-hye.
The Bank of Korea has decided to trim its key interest rate by 25 basis points to 1.75% in March after holding it steady for 4 straight months. The rate cut that came on Thursday marks the third in less than a year and leaves the key rate at a historic low. The central bank cut the rate 2 times in the second half of last year, each by 1/4 of a percentage point as it joined government efforts to prop up the ailing economy. The central bank's move this month comes amid a wave of global monetary easing that countries like China, Japan, and India are engaged in, along with weak economic sentiment at home despite aggressive government stimulus measures. Low inflation that would have actually dropped last month if it were not for a tobacco price hike also left room for more monetary easing. But the lowered key rate will stoke concerns about the country's snowballing household debt, which already exceeds $950 billion. The government's deregulation drive in the housing sector and the 2 rate cuts last year worked in tandem to boost housing loans. Korea might also face a massive capital outflow with a historically low key rate due to a possible rate hike by the U.S. Federal Reserve in the coming months. The record low key rate also raises concerns over the central bank's independence, as some say recent remarks made by the country's finance minister may have pressured the BOK to cut the key rate. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Now, foreign investment banks have generally lowered their economic growth outlooks for Korea for this year. The average is in accordance with the Bank of Korea's outlook of 3.4%, but some have gone down to the 2% range on weaker domestic consumption and falling oil prices. Our Son Jung-in reports.
Foreign investment banks were prompt to adjust Korea's growth forecast on mounting downward pressure. According to Bloomberg, the market median for Korea's growth forecast stood at 3.4% on Thursday, in line with the Bank of Korea's forecast. Bloomberg's survey of 27 institutions showed Nomura has slashed its outlook for Korea's growth to 2.5% from its earlier forecast of 3%, becoming the first foreign institution to project an expansion in the 2% range. Analysts cited slumping domestic consumption and slowing exports as factors denting the growth rate, along with the global economy recovering at a slower pace than anticipated. They say external factors such as the prospect of the U.S. raising its interest rate and the weakening of the Japanese yen could also drag Korea's growth down further. But some investment banks have kept their rosy outlooks. Barclays has projected a growth rate of 4%, while Credit Suisse has matched the government's outlook of 3.8%. Inflation projections, however, by foreign investment banks have dropped to 1.3% from an earlier figure of 1.7%, as Seoul is under stronger deflationary pressure this year. Domestic research institutes have also indicated that they could lower the inflation outlook in their quarterly projections next month, with oil prices at a lower level than they projected last year. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
President Park Geun-hye is scheduled to hold a 3-way meeting with the leaders of Korea's ruling and opposition parties next Tuesday. The president is expected to talk about achievements from her recent Middle East trip and seek party cooperation, especially on the economic front. This will be the first time the president will sit down with the leaders of both parties since Moon Jae-in, that's her presidential election rival, that he was elected as the opposition party leader last month. But before that meeting, President Park on Friday will discuss her Middle East trip with 5 of the nation's leaders, including the Prime Minister and the parliamentary speaker. Senior diplomats from South Korea, China, and Japan met in Seoul on Wednesday to lay the groundwork for a three-way foreign ministers meeting slated for later this month. But some already say the high-level meeting won't do much to ease tensions in the region. Here's our Foreign Affairs Ministry correspondent Hwang Ji-hye.
Tangled in historical and territorial disputes, senior officials from Korea, China, and Japan met in Seoul on Wednesday in an effort to revive cooperation. Their second meeting in 6 months has added importance, since it comes ahead of the first trilateral foreign ministers meeting since 2012.
We have come to agree to host the foreign ministers meeting this month, and convened here under the clear purpose of preparing for the meeting.
Korea, as the current rotating chair, has been pushing for a gathering of the top diplomats since late last year. The three-way talks had been stalled mainly due to the territorial row between Japan and China over the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea, known in China as Diaoyu. Despite the challenges, Japanese Deputy Foreign Minister Shinsuke Sugiyama expressed hope for the ministerial meeting to lead to a summit.
In a better position to prepare for the upcoming foreign ministerial trilateral to be held sometime latter half of this month, and hopefully to be followed up further by the highest level of us three.
Taking a more cautious stance, the Chinese chief delegate refrained from mentioning such possibility, but acknowledged the importance of the upcoming meeting.
And this progress has not come easily and should be cherished.
But there's little hope that the ministerial meeting will actually break the ice between the three neighbors. An official at Seoul's foreign ministry said the top diplomats will strictly be discussing their trilateral cooperation, leaving out the more sensitive historical and territorial issues. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
The word out of Washington is that the recently appointed U.S. Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter will pay a visit to Korea sometime next month. Secretary of State John Kerry may also come to Korea, although it will be on a separate trip. Our Lee Ji-yoon has more.
2 top U.S. officials are likely to fly out to Seoul next month. This is according to Korea-based Yonhap News Agency on Wednesday, citing diplomatic sources in Washington. U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter and Secretary of State John Kerry are reportedly planning separate trips to Northeast Asia in April, including stops in South Korea and Japan. Their visits come ahead of President Park Geun-hye and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's planned trips to Washington this year. As to what Carter is planning to do while he's here, the report says he's likely to talk about stepping up cooperation between Seoul and Washington to deter North Korean nuclear threats. The focus is also on whether or not he will talk about the issue of deploying an advanced U.S. missile defense system called THAAD to South Korea. Supporters claim deploying the system would better protect the country against North Korea's ballistic missiles, while opponents say it would only worsen relations with China and Russia. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is also expected to make a stop in Seoul sometime next month. Yonhap sources say that while he's here, Kerry's likely to address any remaining issues surrounding last week's attack on U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Mark Lippert by an anti-U.S. activist. Kerry may also discuss ways to strengthen ties between Seoul and Washington in the wake of the attack on the U.S. ambassador. Lee Ji-yoon, ARIRANG News.
It's a meeting that you don't get to hear about every day. The U.S. and China held their first Asia-Pacific security dialogue in Washington on Tuesday local time. The U.S. Defense Department says David Scheer, Assistant Secretary of Defense, met with Guang Yufei, Director of the Chinese Defense Ministry's Foreign Affairs Office, to discuss pending security issues in the region. But the details of the meeting were not made available. Speculation is that the two sides touched upon North Korea issues as a core part of East Asia security. The meeting was first announced by former Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel when he visited China in April last year. The BBC is reportedly reviewing plans to provide a radio news service for people in North Korea. Citing a spokesperson from the BBC, The Telegraph reports that the broadcaster is examining ways to set up a special news channel in Pyongyang. The report added, however, that the plan is in an early stage of development and it could take years before any service was up and running. It said the broadcast, if launched, would probably be aired in Korean rather than in English, relying mostly on shortwave radio. Iraqi forces are continuing their offensive in the city of Tikrit, making crucial gains as they push through to the city center. If they are successful in taking back the city, it will be an important victory in the struggle to push back Islamic State militants in Iraq. Kim Min-ji reports.
Iraqi security forces and militias pushed toward major landmarks in the city of Tikrit on Wednesday in their biggest offensive so far against the group that calls itself Islamic State. Joint Iraqi forces raised the national flag above a military hospital, one of the latest installations retaken from the militants. Soldiers took out snipers and had to defuse roadside bombs and booby-trap buildings. Officials say government troops and Shia militias now hold a large portion of one northern district. Tikrit, which is the hometown of former dictator Saddam Hussein, was seized by Islamic State militants last June in a lightning advance. The military offensive that began early this month includes a combined force of up to 30,000 troops. If Iraqi forces regain full control of the city, it will give them the momentum to retake the Islamic State-held city of Mosul, which is 10 times bigger than Tikrit. In an apparent retaliation, the Islamic State militants launched a fierce assault in the western Iraqi city of Ramadi. It involved more than a dozen suicide car bomb attacks. The extremist group identified one of the suicide bombers as an Australian teen. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
And over to Russia now. A member of Moscow's Human Rights Council, Andrei Babushkin, says one of the suspects charged in the murder of opposition leader and Kremlin's outspoken critic Boris Nemtsov may have been tortured into a confession. After visiting the prison, Babushkin says he spotted numerous wounds on the body of Zaur Dadayev, who had earlier confessed to, quote, being involved in the Moscow shooting. Dadayev told Babushkin that he was starved and left hooded until his court appearance in Moscow on Sunday. Babushkin urged an outside inspection of the ongoing investigation, while Russia's powerful investigative committee immediately pushed back, accusing the official of, quote, meddling and threatened to investigate. Beijing is coming down hard on smokers with an extensive ban set to go into effect in June. Smoking will be banned in all indoor public spaces in the capital of China, and new regulations will restrict advertising and sales as well. Here's our Shin Se-min.
Smokers in Beijing will no longer be able to light up in public as lawmakers seek to set a strong standard for all Chinese cities, starting with the capital. Starting in June, all indoor public spaces in Beijing, including restaurants, offices, and public transportation, will be smoke-free. Smoking is already banned in public outdoor spaces such as those near hospitals and schools. Stronger warning signs on tobacco products will also be required, along with tougher regulations on tobacco advertising in newspapers, magazines, and posters on public transportation. Regulations on selling tobacco will also be tightened.
Cigarettes will not be sold within a 100-meter radius of a school district.
Smokers caught breaking the rule will be fined with over $30 for a single violation, up from the current fine of $1.60. Those selling cigarettes to minors will be hit with a fine of over $30,000. The drive comes as the country's smoking problem has worsened, with the World Health Organization saying that more than 1 million Chinese citizens die of tobacco-related illness every year. Roughly 80% of Chinese men ages 15 or older smoke, exposing some 760 million people to secondhand smoke. But there are rising concerns about the effectiveness. Many such bans in China have been ignored in the past, and Beijing will be just one of 14 cities that will restrict smoking in indoor public spaces. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Korea is making moves to expand the nation's food export items to the global halal market following President Park Geun-hye's recent visit to the Middle East. To help local food companies in Korea understand Muslim dietary laws, the government has set up a new R&D agency devoted to that task. Our Park Ji-won reports.
The world's Muslim faithfuls follow certain food restrictions. For example, they don't consume pork of any form, alcohol, and animals that are not properly slaughtered under Islamic law. Permissible food is labeled halal, as halal means allowed in Arabic. And in an effort to expand the nation's food export items to the global halal market, a new halal food agency began operations on Thursday under the Korea Food Research Institute. The agency will focus on analyzing halal food standards in diverse Muslim countries like the United Arab Emirates and Indonesia, and provide the nation's food manufacturers with guidelines on how to produce and develop halal-certified foods. The Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs says the establishment of the Halal Food Agency is a follow-up measure of a recent MOU between Korea and the United Arab Emirates to promote cooperation in halal foods. The Agriculture Ministry hopes the MOU and the newly launched Halal Food Agency could help domestic food exporters make easier inroads into the global food market by targeting some 1.8 billion Muslims. The worldwide halal food market is estimated to be around 20% of the global food market. And since the late 2000s, many domestic food manufacturers like Nongshim and Pulmuwon have exported some of its food items, such as instant noodles and snacks that earned halal certifications. Korea aims to double the nation's halal foods exports from some $680 million last year to over $1.2 billion by 2017. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
And on to some cultural news. The Korea National Opera has finally opened its season, and they've chosen a globally acclaimed masterpiece to kick things off. Our Im Yoon-hee had a sneak peek. Take a look.
An unexpected love, situated in the heart of the tragic French Revolution. The opera Andrea Chenier is composed by Umberto Giordano and based loosely on the story of the 18th century French poet André Chenier, who was executed during the Revolution. Andrea has lost his passion for the arts, that is until he falls in love with Maddalena, daughter of a countess. The revolution turns the tables for everyone, and Andrea and Maddalena face uncertainty, but they do so hand in hand, their love inspiring all those around them.
Chenier is an interesting character because he's not only a poet but also a soldier and a lover, and he has to separate those feelings. So I had to pay close attention to details while playing the role. Also because we are performing on a symbolic stage with very little stage settings, the audience's attention is honed in on us and our performance.
But can an Italian opera about a French poet performed by a Korean cast, be as powerful as it was originally intended. With such an open stage setting, all of the attention is drawn to the characters and their actions. Each emotion, each feeling of rage, portrayed through the crumpling of paper, the taste of dissatisfaction littering the floor. The opera is led by director Stefano Poda, a renowned opera mastermind from Italy. To overcome all language and cultural barriers, he's utilized the universal language of the body to express strong emotions, using each and every detail to deliver as much impact as possible.
Through Andrea Chenier, I want to show a meaningful and historically accurate performance using a very minimal approach. France's history is being relived through this stage, but I don't care about realistically portraying it. I want to use symbolism and show a historical issue that the modern audience can relate to. This world has to always move forward and continually progress, and that progress later becomes history.
The French Revolution may have ended over 200 years ago, and Chenier's life now just a speck of dust in time. But all of the lives lost became history gained, making it possible for a better tomorrow. Im Yoon-hee, ARIRANG News.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. Meteorologists say we are expecting some strong winds today. However, it will be a bit milder than yesterday with slightly higher temperatures expected. Now, the sky is expected to stay clear all throughout the day, but there will be a light rain in the evening here in the capital and in Gangwon province as well. Now, this cool spell is lingering for quite some time due to the influence of a strong developed low pressure front in Japan. And once the pressure decreases, weather will get back to milder conditions. Now, and it doesn't look it's going to take a long time because we are expecting some higher readings for tomorrow, and Saturday and Sunday will get even up into the teens. Now let's have a look at the readings for today. So it'll be lingering around 8 degrees this afternoon, while the southern regions such as Gwangju and Busan will top higher at 12 and 10 degrees. Moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 12 as well. Dokdo hits to 5 degrees, while Mangkeungang is sunny at -4 degrees. Well, that's all for now in Shell Park, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's it for this edition of ARIRANG News. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. From me and the rest of the team in Seoul, thank you for watching. More updates coming up at 6 p.m. Korea time.